Welcome back, everyone, to another deep dive. Today we're really diving into something I think a lot of people can relate to, at least if you've ever been that passenger who gets a little queasy on a road trip. I'm talking about motion sickness, but we're focusing specifically on how this age-old problem is playing out or might play out in the era of self-driving cars. And to help us unpack all this, we're going straight to the source. A study published in the International Journal of Human-Computer Interaction. It's a mouthful, I know. But stick with me, it's really fascinating. It's titled Verifying Motion Sickness Induction in Automated Vehicles Using Motion-Based Driving Simulators.
Yeah, motion sickness is definitely a timely topic, especially given all the hype around self-driving cars. I mean, they promise all this extra free time during your commute, but I think there's this potential roadblock that we can't just ignore.
Exactly, and I think the study really brings to light that this is not just some minor inconvenience, right?
Right, exactly.
Motion sickness is a big deal for a lot of people.
Absolutely. I mean, the study even mentions a survey where 67%, hold on, 67% of the people they surveyed said they experienced motion sickness as a passenger. That's a huge number.
Yeah, that is wild. I mean, think about it. As self-driving cars become more and more common, we're all essentially going to be passengers, right? So it makes figuring this whole motion sickness thing out even more urgent.
Yeah, definitely.
So okay, let's start with like the basics. Why is it that being a passenger seems to make us more susceptible to motion sickness in the first place?
Well, there's a few theories about that, but the one that always comes up is sensory conflict, right? You know, when you're the one behind the wheel, your brain is actively predicting all the car's movements. It's processing all these visual cues, and you're constantly making these little
Oh,
adjustments.
you're like in control. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Hmm.
But as a passenger, you're much more passive. You're essentially just along for the ride, so you're kind of at the mercy of the driver's decisions, and your body and brain can get out of sync.
Oh, so it's like your brain is getting these mixed signals.
Yeah, I mean, think about it. Your eyes are telling your brain, hey, we're sitting still. But your inner ear, which you know controls your balance and senses motion, is saying, hold on, we're definitely moving here. It creates this disconnect, and your brain freaks out a little.
And then bam, motion sickness.
Right.
Got it. Okay, so our brains are like playing catch up, struggling to adapt to this new way of getting around. But hold on, is sensory conflict the only thing at play here?
It's a big one for sure, but there are a few other interesting theories about motion sickness, too.
Like what?
Well, there's the postural instability theory, which
Yeah.
suggests that we feel sick when we can't really stabilize ourselves in a moving environment.
Right, so it's like if you're being jostled around and you can't anticipate it or like brace yourself or anything.
Yeah, exactly. That's the idea.
Huh. Okay, interesting. So what else? What other theories?
Another one is what they call the anticipation theory, which suggests that, if we can't predict what a car is going to do next, like if there's a sudden swerve or you slam on the brakes, we're more likely to feel sick because our brains like to be in the know.
Oh, yeah, I guess our brains don't like surprises when it comes to motion.
Right, exactly. Yeah. So, I mean, you've got all these different theories about why motion sickness happens. But what this particular study looked at was what happens when you're doing other things while riding in a self-driving car.
Right.
So things like reading or working or even just spacing out, right?
Ah, okay, so multitasking in a moving vehicle. You'd think that adding more sensory input would just make things worse, right?
Yeah, you'd think so. More stimuli equals more nausea,
Right.
right?
Right.
Well, turns out not so fast.
Okay, what did they find?
So they had their participants do this visual task where they had to look at a screen and find specific letter combinations. It was designed to be pretty demanding, cognitively speaking, and what they found was that it actually reduced their motion sickness scores.
Whoa, wait a minute. So you're telling me that keeping my mind busy might actually help with motion sickness?
That's what the study seems to suggest, yeah. They think it's due to something called a masking effect.
Masking effect.
Yeah, the idea is that the visual task was so engaging that it distracted the participants from feeling nauseous.
Huh, so it's almost like their brains were too preoccupied to register the discomfort signal.
Exactly.
So wait, is this something that, like, have you ever noticed feeling less carsick when you're super focused on a book or, like, lost in a conversation?
Yeah, I think that's possible. This masking effect might be happening all the time without us even knowing it.
Yeah.
It really opens up a whole new way of thinking about motion sickness.
Especially as we head into this world of self-driving cars.
Absolutely.
This is fascinating, and we're just getting started. We'll be back in a flash to explore even more about motion sickness in those self-driving cars, so don't go anywhere. So this masking effect, it really is a game changer, right? It kind of suggests that motion sickness isn't just about physical sensations, but also our mental state, right?
Yeah. It really does, and I think it highlights how complex the relationship is between our senses and our bodies and our minds.
I mean, imagine if we could actually harness this effect. What if future cars came with, like, built-in entertainment systems, specifically designed to combat motion sickness?
That'd be incredible.
Yeah.
Imagine playing a game in the car and it like subtly shifts your field of view,
Mm.
keeping your brain just engaged enough to avoid that nausea. Or what if there were like calming virtual reality
Oh.
experiences,
Both.
like you put on a headset and you're suddenly transported to a peaceful beach, even if you're stuck in traffic.
I love that. And remember how we talked about those personalized motion profiles? Like, what if the car could actually learn your sensitivities and adapt how it drives based on that?
Right. That would be amazing.
Mm.
For someone who's really sensitive to sudden movements, the car could prioritize smooth acceleration and braking.
Yeah.
And for people who rely more on anticipation, it could stick to more predictable turning patterns.
This is really exciting stuff. It feels like we're on the verge of a real transportation revolution here. Self-driving cars, they have the potential to not only get us places, but to actually make the journey enjoyable.
Yeah, but none of that matters if people are feeling sick the whole time.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Minimizing discomfort, that's the key to unlocking the full potential of these cars. So, okay, before we get too carried away, let's take a step back. This study used a pretty sophisticated setup to actually induce motion sickness in their participants, a motion-based driving simulator. Can you walk us through how these things work?
Yeah, so basically these simulators allow us to study driving behavior and passenger comfort in a controlled environment. The one used in this study had a moving seat that mimicked the feeling of being in a car. It had multiple screens for projecting realistic visuals and even had sound effects. Yeah.
It sounds pretty immersive, but didn't you mention earlier that these simulators are usually designed to minimize motion sickness? So how did they actually make people feel sick?
Yeah, that's the thing, right? They had to kind of work against the system a bit. So they created two different driving routes. One was like a control route, which just simulated normal everyday driving. And then they had a treatment route, which was designed specifically to, induce motion sickness.
Okay, so what made this treatment route so special? What did they do?
Well, they incorporated lots of sharp turns and lots of what we call lateral acceleration, which is that sideways force you feel when the car changes direction really quickly.
Ugh, I'm getting queasy just thinking about it.
Yeah, it's like driving on a winding mountain road, but amplified.
Okay, so the big question is, did it work? Did they successfully induce motion sickness?
Yep. They found that both routes did cause some motion sickness. But unsurprisingly, the treatment route with all that lateral movement, it caused significantly more discomfort.
That makes sense, but even the control route caused some motion sickness. Does
Right.
that mean, like, no matter how smooth the ride is, we're all eventually going to feel a little queasy?
That's a good question. I mean, this seems to suggest that it might be possible. Even if self-driving cars get really good at navigating smoothly, just being in motion for a long time might still trigger discomfort for some folks. So I think it highlights just how important it is to develop a multi-pronged approach to combating motion sickness. It's not just about avoiding jerky movements or sharp turns. It's also about understanding those cumulative effects of prolonged motion.
So it's about thinking holistically. Okay, so we've been talking a lot about these NDRTs, these non-driving related tasks. What would some real-world examples of these be like if we were talking about self-driving cars?
Well, you could imagine in-car gaming systems that are designed to help with motion sickness, like subtly adjusting the player's field of view or incorporating things that encourage head movement, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
Or even think about work applications that require just enough mental engagement to keep you from feeling sick.
Yeah.
Like imagine collaborating on a presentation during your commute without feeling nauseous.
I like that. And what about those like virtual reality environments? Those sound pretty cool.
Yeah. Imagine you put on a headset and it transports you to a peaceful beach or a forest with calming sounds and visuals. It'd be like your own little oasis on wheels, right?
Okay, now I'm definitely sold. But let's shift gears a little bit here. What about the ethics of all this? Like, are we essentially just distracting people to the point where they might not be able to take control if needed?
Yeah, that's definitely something to think about. The goal is to find a balance.
Hmm.
Engage people enough to reduce motion sickness without compromising their safety. I think the design of these NDRTs is going to be really crucial.
Right. They need to be engaging, but not too demanding.
Right, exactly.
But what about like potential bias?
Mm.
Could these personalized motion profiles end up favoring certain driving styles, like catering to specific age groups or abilities?
Yeah, that's a really important point. Inclusivity and fairness have to be top priorities. We have to make sure these profiles are designed for everyone, regardless of age or physical ability. And that means lots of testing, lots of evaluation to make sure we're not inadvertently excluding anyone.
Yeah, definitely. It sounds like there's a lot of potential here, but also a lot of responsibility to make sure we're developing and using these technologies ethically. Okay, but let's go back to the basics for a second. For our listeners who may not be as familiar with all this, what exactly is motion sickness and what makes it such an unpleasant experience?
Yeah, good question.
Yeah, that's a good question. It's one a lot of us have probably asked ourselves at some point, when we're feeling that wave of nausea hit. So at its core, what is motion sickness?
Well, it's basically our body's way of saying, hey, something's not right here.
Hmm.
It's a physiological response that's triggered by this mismatch between what our eyes are seeing and what our inner ear, which is all about balance, is sensing.
Right, it's that sensory conflict we talked about.
Exactly. And that sends our brain into this confused state. And then, a bunch of unpleasant symptoms can follow.
And the symptoms, those can vary quite a bit from person to person.
Oh,
Right?
absolutely. Yeah.
What are we talking about here?
I mean, it can range from mild discomfort to like utter misery, depending on the person and how intense the motion is. We're talking nausea, dizziness, cold sweats, headaches,
Yeah.
and in some cases, even vomiting.
Yeah, it's definitely not something you want to be dealing with on a regular basis, especially if you're trying to relax or get work done in a self-driving car. But what's interesting is that the study, it didn't just look at whether people got sick. They also looked at how motion sickness actually plays out in a simulated environment. Like they went beyond just creating that nausea-inducing driving route.
Right. They really wanted to understand how things like exposure time and the intensity of the movements impacted people's experiences.
So what did they find?
Well, one of the things they found was that even short bursts of intense lateral acceleration could make people feel really bad.
Which makes sense if you think about it. Anyone who's been on a roller coaster or taken a sharp turn a little too fast knows that feeling of being pushed sideways. It's not pleasant. But they also found that even prolonged exposure to more mild motions could still lead to motion sickness.
Yeah, which is interesting, right? It suggests that even if self-driving cars can figure out how to navigate really smoothly, just being in motion for a long time might still be a problem.
Huh, that's something to think about. Okay, so how did they actually measure motion sickness in this study? Did they just ask people how nauseous they were feeling?
Well, they did, but they used a specific scale for that, the Fast Motion Sickness Scale, or FMS. Basically, it allows participants to rate their nausea level from 0 to 20. 20 being, well, let's just say very, very nauseous.
I can just picture someone in the simulator gripping the armrests and saying, I'm at a 17, make it stop.
Yeah, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
But they also used a more detailed questionnaire called the Motion Sickness Assessment Questionnaire, or MSAQ.
And what does that one do?
So that one digs a little deeper. It asks about specific symptoms like dizziness, headaches, sweating, stomach awareness.
So it's like painting a more complete picture of what the person's experiencing.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, so back to you, the listener. Why should you care about all this? Is this just a problem for people who already get car sick easily?
I don't think so. I mean, even if you don't normally experience motion sickness, the dynamics are different when you're not the one driving. And as self-driving cars become more and more common, we're all going to be spending more time as passengers. So I think this research is really important for everyone.
It's about making sure that we can all enjoy the benefits of this new technology without feeling sick and uncomfortable. And the good news is that this research is already pointing to some pretty promising solutions. Things like personalized motion profiles, engaging tasks, even design changes in the cars themselves.
Absolutely. The takeaway here is that this isn't just a problem we have to accept. We have the knowledge and the tools to create a future where motion sickness in cars is a thing of the past.
That's a future I'm definitely on board with. So as we wrap up our deep dive today, here's something for you to think about. What other creative solutions could we come up with? What outside-the-box ideas are we maybe missing?
Yeah, that's a good one. Maybe we'll see advancements in biofeedback systems, helping people regulate their responses, or even personalized virtual environments that create a sense of stability no matter how the car is actually moving.
It's an exciting journey of discovery, and the best part is we're all on it together. Thanks for joining us on the deep dive, and until next time, stay curious.